I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge some of DCPL's top sponsors whose annual financial support helps underwrite public programs like this one tonight. They are Denton's, Douglas Development, Antunovich Associates, Atlantic Refinishing and Restoration, Fire, Blender and Bell, EHT Traceries, and KCE Structural Engineers. Many thanks to you all for your dedication to historic preservation in Washington, D.C. So before the presentation begins, I just want to share some notes about how the program will work. So please use the Q&A box found at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions of the presenter. I will collect questions and verbally ask them of our presenter at the conclusion of the presentation. For those of you joining us on Facebook Live, DCPL's Community Outreach and Grants Manager, Jess Unger, will be monitoring any questions that you all might have and will pass those along to me as well. And if we don't get to everybody's questions tonight, you can email us at info@dcpreservation.org and we will pass those along to our speaker. So I am so pleased to introduce you all to today's presenter. Carol Highsmith is an American photographer, author, and publisher who's photographed in every state, as well as the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. She is visually documenting the entire American vista, including landscapes, architecture, urban and rural life, and people in their work environments. Highsmith is donating her life's work of tens of thousands of images royalty-free to the Library of Congress, which has established a rare one-person archive featuring her collection. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Carol.
Okay, my name is Carol Highsmith, and I want to thank the DC Preservation League for inviting me, and also actually kind of creating my career for me. You see, I started in the Willard Hotel, and they saved it. They, don't tear it down, saved the Willard Hotel. President Nixon was going to rip it all down except for the old post office tower. That was it. And that's not what happened. Thank goodness. So I did other things, and I had a career in broadcasting. And I decided I was going to the Corcoran School of Photography at night, having won a trip to Russia and China. So I got acquainted with the cameras. And I knew Oliver Carr, and I asked him if I could go into the Willard Hotel and just take a model from my school. So I did. And this is the model, and that's the Willard. Now, I know it's unrecognizable. That was 1980. 1980. Now, you see this staircase? That was the only staircase I could get all the way up to the top floor where the ballroom was. And so I went up and down. It was just me and the guard, by the way. Oh, and there were several rats the size of cats. And there was a homeless person living on the 6th floor who started the Willard on fire a couple of times. But anyway, this flight of stairs that I went up and down for 3 years. One day I was in the trailer, thank goodness. This was after they came with their guns that went, and the whole flight of stairs fell. Oh, that could have been me. This is the ballroom, and that's where I used to go all the way up to the top. Now, what they decided is, when they were going to make the hotel work, is that they wanted to make this 2 floors rather than 1, and put the ballroom elsewhere and not as large. So they took it all down. Only demolition is terribly dangerous. They took this all down in like a few swoops, and it just came crashing down. And I had 5 cameras all lined up. They would not let me walk on it. It was a mess. It was like nothing I had ever seen. It was like a nuclear attack. The next day, a man walked by. You can see my little thing right down and over there, and a wall fell on him and he died. It's very dangerous work. So the Willard, this is John Barianos, working with his men that most of whom came over from Europe to put the Willard back together again. This is a photograph that I saw once I had been in the Willard for, let's say, a couple of years. This man walked by with a mitt full of photographs, and I said, "What's that?" And he said, we're using these images to put the Willard back together again because we have no architectural drawings. Can you imagine that for a building that historic? They had nothing. So there is a reason why it's the new Willard down there. It was 1901. A woman by the name of Frances Benjamin Johnston did these. And the desk, by the way, that desk is still there. This room is gone. What a shame. It was a stained glass window up here. These are all Frances Benjamin Johnston's images. And I said, well, where are these? Where'd you get them? And he said, well, we got them from the Library of Congress. Well, I had no idea, you know, Library of Congress. I kind of knew what it was. I didn't know that it's the most historic photo collection on earth. So he invited me down, and I went down to the Library of Congress and saw the rest of her photographs and died. I said to myself, you've got to be kidding me that this woman took these images. Oh, and by the way, Andrew Carnegie sent her down south to do the antebellum mansions, the plantations, and the 30s. Her collection is the cornerstone of the most historic photo collection on earth. And so I said to myself and to the Library of Congress staff that day, I have to follow her. I have to do what she did. And I think the reason that I was so compelled to do that was that I had just gone through the 70s. I mean, I started the Willard 1980, this was maybe 1982. And the 70s were, let's tear it down. Let's tear everything old down. Let's just start afresh and anew. And it was in a lot of concrete. Concrete can work sometimes, but a lot of times it doesn't. Anyway, I said to the staff at the Library of Congress that day, I'm going to do what she did. And the reason I'm doing what she did is for the ages. Very important that we have all this now, and it's very important that we see what she did now. But what about 100 years from now or 1,000 years from now? So anyway, I did the Willard. The night before it opened, there was a bomb scare at National Theater. And I hear a knock on the door, and it was Mary Martin and Carol Channing, who were scared to death because the whole audience was following them. So I made them, they could come in, but they had to pose for me. So they did. So that was really a thrill. Other people that posed for me, how about the entire Willard family? And these are the Willard brothers right here. They all had old bellman's coats on. Was that a moment or what? Because I doubt many of these people probably are no longer on this earth. So I finished the Willard. I took the final shot with, there was a huge flower arrangement here, but I took that away so you could really see the architecture. And it was just beautiful, and it had been such a mess. Now, so when I went in there, okay, now remember this? Okay, Frances was in 1901. In 1968, they closed the Willard. Now, prior to that, they put vinyl around the columns to try to keep up, and they had vinyl sofas to try to keep up with the Holiday Inn. It was no longer 5-star. It was lucky if it was 1-star. But it's so famous, unbelievably famous. Abraham Lincoln watches inaugural from here. It's the Hotel of Presidents. Mark Twain used to stay there and walk through it, and people would follow him from one side to the other through Peacock Alley. Houdini stayed here. The Battle Hymn of the Republic was written here. So it's really, when you think about it, it just gives you chill bumps. And when I think, what I saw were 2 rats the size of cats coming out of the wall. Just nothing worked anymore. They had an auction where people came and ripped everything off. Nixon, he had a little party here when he was running, and they gave away doors as door prizes. And it was just, and then Martin Luther King died, and they burned all around the Willard Hotel, and it was just closed. That was it. That was it. So there were holes in the wall. You could see pigeons flew through. I mean, it was just, it was the saddest thing I've ever seen in my life. It really was. So on opening day, I had the entire Willard staff come and just pose for me. And the Washington Post did a little story about the Willard opening, and they showed me up in a crane. So the other thing that I did that was very important. Now, I do want to say one thing. This is not about me. It's about us. I'm just a cog in the wheel. But what I did as a cog in the wheel was amazingly important. And that is every chance I got, I flew it. Now, why was that important? I worked with Pennsylvania Avenue Development Corporation. It was a quasi-government organization. Most of you probably know what it was. And I said, look, I'll make a deal with you. You won't have to pay me much, if anything at all, but I want access. I want to be able to get in helicopters all the time. So I would call the park police on beautiful days, go up, and then I'd call the DC police and I'd go up then. I have hundreds, probably thousands of aerials of Washington, DC. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now the Francis also went over to the White House and did some interiors. This is Quentin Roosevelt. I have also photographed presidential homes and their collections, like the gun that killed Lincoln and the coat that he wore that night. The sad thing about seeing this little image of Quentin is that I was at his home. It was right about this time of year, and I looked down at the ground, and there were little, what they call, I think it's called snowdrops, if I'm not mistaken, had just bloomed, just little white flowers. And Quentin had written his father as an older man in the war and said, I'll be home before they bloom. And he never made it. So that made me very sad looking at that. Now, I've spent some time in the White House too. I spent a day with Reagan in the Oval Office, photographing everybody that came in. It was amazing. Now, I spent 17 years on Pennsylvania Avenue, recording anything I could and everything I could. And as darling as this is, it was a little bit what Pennsylvania, the buildings were just trash. There was very little that had anything left. John Kennedy rode down the avenue for his inaugural, and he said it was the saddest thing he'd ever seen in his life. Now, he died not too long afterwards, and Jackie Kennedy and, I can't remember his name, Senator, I will remember it in a minute, took it over and set up a Pennsylvania Avenue Development Corporation. So as the Willard was finishing up, I went down to this, what was called at the time, Sears House, Daniel Moynihan, sorry. That was his name, and that's, of course, what the train station in New York is now named after. Oh my God, I can't wait to get up and see that. This was called Sears House. This is Matthew Brady's original studio, where he photographed president after president. He photographed Lincoln. He photographed Booth. There was not much of high society that didn't swing through this building that he didn't take images of. They left the skylight in there, which was just gave me goosebumps. I could hardly deal with it. But anyway, so I went and I worked on that. And this is even a more amazing view of it. So you can see how incredibly beautiful it is. It was, I think, built around 1849, if I'm not mistaken. So it was Matthew Brady's studio, and he was, doing society, and then he decided to do the Civil War, which was a huge mistake. But anyway, I'll go into that later. And I also went to the old post office, which was also in very sad shape. They finally decided to restore it, They put government agencies in it, and then they put little shops, which I think they found out later was a mistake, because the key was something this massive, I think. Now, who am I to know? Is that it's probably better to be like a Union Station where you have millions of people come through, rather than just a great big huge building and people come for candy in a little shop. So anyway, they found that out, and they, leased it out to Donald Trump for his hotel, and who knows what will happen to it over time. That's really kind of a shot. If I had been home when I found out about this, I'm still on the road. I probably would have had more construction shots and stuff, but this was kind of what it was. Just lots of little stores. This is the clock up above. Now remember, on all the buildings, I was everywhere. I went down all the time and recorded everything I saw, because to me, it was absolutely fascinating. But you see, the Treasury was in pretty good shape, on the outside anyway, although it went through a major restoration too. And you see there's a lot of places that were, taken down, or they were under construction. Everything just about on Pennsylvania Avenue was for a very long time. Now, I also record history in the making. It's not, I am an architectural photographer. Thank goodness I have some of that skill, but I also do people. And this is Martin Luther King's time capsule that is buried right outside the Willard Hotel. He wrote his I Have a Dream speech in the Willard Hotel. That's exactly where it should be. And by the way, that's his family. That was his wife, Floretta, and that's his son, and Marion Barry. So this is the Neighbor Memorial. So you see that I also caught things along the way. This is 1931 is when this was put in. So look how beautiful this is. It shows obviously the world, but you see Market Square isn't there. So there was a lot of in between, and actually I'm not sure it was 1931, because this, I'll have to check my facts on there. But anyway, the key is it is beautiful. I think this actually is the dedication of it, so it might have been in the 80s. And you see also, this is right near Market Square. This is where Sears House is. I don't know if that's still called Sears House, but this is a lot of restoration going on, right and left. This is the Atlantic Coastline building. They took that down brick by brick and moved it. And I thought that was pretty amazing. And then they married it to a much more modern building. This is a shot I took from the Washington Monument. I used to go up there all the time and take, all sorts of aerial views also, not just from a plane, but up there, and the windows opened and da-da-do. But you also see the grass. How sad is that? I mean, this is America's Main Street. This is America's Mall. And look how sad it had become, just burnt. I think a lot of that has been taken care of, if I'm not mistaken. I was there when they put this in Chinatown. That was amazing. It's gorgeous, and I think greatly, greatly adds to Chinatown. I was there also when they put the Yates quilt down in the mall. How neat. Union Station. So, as I'm continuing to document the whole rebuilding of Pennsylvania Avenue, well, I decided, why not go down and do Union Station? Well, that was sadder than sad. Now, this is the pit. There was a problem here. The National Park Service had it. They took it over. And they decided that they would get rid of this vast barrel vaulted place and all the wooden chairs that people had sat in for years and years. And they would just put a pit and a slideshow. Now, the problem is most of what you would see in that slideshow, a lot of it anyway, was right outside the door. But anyway, they decided to do it. Then they had these escalators that would go down, only there was nowhere to go. I mean, I guess you would maybe stand in here. So the Post wrote a little article wondering if more people went down than came up. The slideshow worked, I don't know, maybe a few weeks, maybe a few months, and then the ceiling leaked. So they also wondered whether maybe they should have made an aquarium out of it, if that might have been a good thing to do. So it was obviously really mocking what had happened here, and it was very sad. And there were mushrooms actually that grew on the floor. Now, I was a witness to all this. I did start then, I made another deal with the People Unionization Redevelopment Corporation. I said, hello, access. And they let me come in and photograph it. This is the construction team. Again, Barrianos came down and started working on it. A lot of people from overseas, Italy and Greece, and people that really knew what to do with historic, interiors. But you see this wonderful scaffolding that when they restored it not too long ago, they used the same moving scaffolding, which I thought was quite fascinating, that they had used when they built the place. Daniel Burnham was the architect. You see the access that I was able to get. I mean, how gorgeous is that? And just the whole process of what it's like to do something this massive. To me, it was one of the most fascinating things I'd had ever done because it was so huge. And they did such a good job with it. And then, of course, they kind of really rebuilt this whole area back here. And again, there was an accident where a man fell through the ceiling. So it's a lot. And of course, getting up with those statues was just memorable. I mean, it was incredible to be able to get up there and to see the craftsmen do what they do. And then, of course, the exterior statues and how beautiful they were. So I got a crane to go even with them. And then this kind of, in my estimation, mistake of putting this in. I know it brought in revenue, but this was just meant to be magnificent and for people to just sit in. And I suppose if you eat at the same time, that's okay. But guess what? They've taken it away, thank goodness. So I'm thrilled about that because it didn't really deserve to be there. It's just one of those places that's just fascinating and fabulous. But again, I get back to aerials and the importance of them. You see all this area is blank. It's all been filled in. And back here is much more built up. But that's the importance of aerial photography. You think when you looked at Washington, D.C., that it's always been the same. It's just a lot of monuments. It's probably not going to change that much. Well, that area actually has too, but around it has changed massively, as probably a lot of you know. I also was able to do quite a bit for the National Archives. At this point, I don't think they bring up the any of the important papers because of light. They're just really very, very careful about it. So I was able, though, to photograph, our papers, the most important things we have in America that are hand signed. Anyway, and also just the details in the archives were fascinating. So you see, all of these are here. But the last time I was in, they did not bring them up. They just brought up fake, papers, which I thought was quite interesting. The Droit neighborhood is just fabulous. I mean, it's just incredibly gorgeous. And that's the other thing about DC is that we have all these areas that are so historic and so meaningful. Now, Frances Benjamin Johnston lived here. She didn't live in Detroit, but she lived on 13th Street. So there's always, of course, a moment of silence for me as I go down 13th Street. But I know her house is no longer there, but I know if I go to where her house was and I ride down the street to the, let's say, the White House, a lot of what I'm going to see is what she saw. Now that is fabulous. I also did the Sidney Yates Federal Building. Now I do, as I said, I do our historic federal buildings throughout America. This happened to be in DC. It's right across from the old post office, but is that magnificent or what? And this is the William Jefferson Clinton building, the spiral staircase. So just as you see some of the lights are out, sorry about that. As we start to go inside places, how gorgeous they are and what we have. This is a National Shrine of Immaculate Conception. It was built from 1920 to 1959. You see how magnificent it is. I did a brochure for them, so they had me all over the map. And so I have all those images. Of course, the old executive office building is kind of to die for. That was 1871 through 1888. I did a book on the Korean War Memorial. And being able to do aerials of it on, I don't know, the week it was built was just a moment. It was a moment in time because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, these trees died. And so they had to replace them, and that was all kind of massive. But it really was, it was a brand new memorial. I think it still draws tremendous amounts of crowds. It was a wonderful gleaming moment for the mall. This again is the Navy Memorial. But I also did a book on the Embassies of Washington, and I went into a lot of the embassies. And this is the Embassy of the Ivory Coast, which is just magnificent inside. This is the Belgian Embassy. There's a little detail. This is the Indonesian Embassy on Mass Avenue. Again, to be able to get into these places was fabulous. This is the French Embassy. But you see all of what we have. I mean, you see one thing when you just look, when you drive through DC and you look at the mansions or you look at the monuments or whatever, but you see a whole other side of the District of Columbia when you go inside. This is the Embassy of Mexico and how gorgeous that is. And I also was there when they opened the Canadian Embassy, which was in the 80s. And that was a moment. This is George H.W. Bush. And also just the beauty of the interiors of our office buildings. This was, again, built in the 80s. This is an acreage building that, again, was in the 70s and 80s. This is the Macmillan Reservoir, which was 1902. I don't know what's happening with that now. I know there was some movement and shaking going on, but I really don't know if anything will ever change there, whether they're going to allow it. I have no idea, but it is kind of pretty inside. This is the Scottish Rites building and how gorgeous that is inside and outside. It's absolutely beautiful. It was 1911. This is the National Academy of Science, a little detail. Everything in that building is just to die for, and that was 1924. This is the Capitol. I worked in the Capitol for many months. I got to know the Capitol Police very well, so well they would just wave me on in. And now when I think what they've gone through, it just makes me sick. This is actually the center of the dome. This is the whole center of what you see. Watergate, fascinating. I mean, look at the Watergate Hotel, if you want to call that, office building, residence. It's many things. It's been many things. That was 1963 to 1971 when that was built. And so now it's actually becoming historic, which is very interesting because at the time it seemed like it was about as modern as you get. And then, of course, the Supreme Court inside is just gorgeous. And that was 1935. Frederick Douglass's house was a moment for me. As I think I said, I have done many presidential homes and their collections. Frederick Douglass, his home and his collection. He, by the way, died just a minute or two from here, right in the hallway, just around the corner almost. So he lived and died in his house. He was a great man, and look at that wonderful portrait of him. And then there's the Barrel House. So I also love to get just little nuances of DC. I understand that that is either moving or gone. I'm hoping they keep the barrel. Things change, folks, and that's why I do what I do, because they do. And I don't think that maybe even has Barrel House liquor on it anymore, but it sure did at the time I caught it. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. That was 1940s. And of course, the Arboretum and how gorgeous those original columns are from the Capitol. And Georgetown, well, that also was just, how lucky are we to have it, really, when you think about it. And it hasn't changed much. Franklin's School, Francis Benjamin Johnston also took images of it. If I'm not mistaken, I think that is where Alexander Graham Bell made his phone conversation. Not sure if it was the original one, but I think it was one of them. The reason that I'm so confident about giving my images to the Library of Congress and working with the Library of Congress is when he did that phone conversation, they recorded it on a wax cylinder. Now, the only way you can hear or get the recording off a wax cylinder is a wax cylinder reader. And once you put that through, that's it. You'll never be able to hear it again through any other form. It's gone, it's spent. Well, the Library of Congress was able to get that off without putting it through the reader. So they still have the original wax cylinder, which is amazing. But anyway, Franklin School to die for. And I also love nuances. Just to stop along North Capitol Street and kind of catch some fun little places and shops. I mean, we've just come so far. We really have. And a lot of this was kind of falling apart. And then there's Ford's Theater and how glorious it is. This was taken several years ago from the Peterson House. I think they've changed some of it around Ford's Theater. I also did all of anything that had to do with his death. So the gun, the coat, the pillows, Peterson House, everything you can imagine, all for history's sake. Oh, wore me out. And then, of course, while we're talking about Lincoln, why not talk about the Civil War? Because the whole thing is all kind of put together in bas-relief on the building museum, and it's about as gorgeous as you get. So this again is the Korean Memorial. I was able to get there a week before they opened it and produce a book in 1 week, 90,000 copies for all the people that showed up to that on the mall that day. Never mind, I can't believe I didn't age about 20 years. And also just the moments that I've had when there's weather in DC. When I'm home, and obviously I was home for this, I race down there as fast as I can because how amazing. This was what the Korean War was all about. It was about weather. So amazing. And then of course, when I say to people, who famous that you know has a statue on the mall other than Martin Luther King? No one. So he must be pretty famous. Pretty amazing. And look how beautiful this is. It really, in my estimation, is. Now, not everybody agrees with me. This is a monument to Theodore Roosevelt over on Roosevelt Island. And then North Capitol Street. I mean, all around the Capitol. How gorgeous that is. Oh my God. The historic areas around the Capitol are just really almost, there are no words to describe it. We're so lucky to have them. So again, I get back to these aerials and the value of them. Things have changed a little bit. I have, the monument during the earthquake, we almost lost it. I have been very present during the restoration of the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Memorial, Jefferson Memorial. So I've spent years up and down the stairs on all of them. And again, this is after the earthquake and what they had to do to the Washington Memorial, which is unbelievable and hard to believe that there was an earthquake in DC. Before though all that happened, I was able to get up with one or two other people in the Washington Monument and take this image. They opened a window for me, and I'm not sure the window's open anymore. So I'm quite thrilled that I was able to get this. And then, of course, the scaffolding on the Lincoln, the Washington Monument, and how important that was. But it was a moment. It was a moment in time. We've seen scaffolding on just about everything I have anyway. I think it's been on the Capitol Dome several times. And then, of course, there's nothing like the cherry blossoms. I was around when FDR Memorial was dedicated and built. Quite thrilled about that and how beautiful it is. This is the Evening Star building and just some of the moments I had with the workers. As you see, you can see all the way through it. The Library of Congress, I spent 2 years in the Library of Congress photographing every nuance. It has more art than I've ever seen in my life. Life magazine used my images for an article. They felt it was the most beautiful building in America, and I am not so sure that they are right. They weren't right. I guess it's no longer alive. But anyway, how gorgeous that reading room is, and all the nuances of the Library of Congress and what it took. Blair House, I also spent about a month in Blair House going in and out and catching the different rooms. There's many rooms in the Blair House, and it's interesting. Robert Kennedy's office and the Justice Department and the murals. Now, it took GSA, who I work for, 3 months to get me into justice because it's kind of a big deal. But I've never seen so much art in my life other than the Library of Congress. It was just gorgeous. And then again, getting back to aerials, and you see Market Square and the Navy Memorial and Sears House and all the little buildings and the archives, and just how gorgeous. Now, I left DC. I've been back many times, and occasionally I'll work here. But I started doing books for Random House all over the country. And one day I was working in New York and doing a book on New York City. And I got to the World Trade Center and I thought, I can't put this in my camera. It doesn't work. It's too tall. So I rented a helicopter from New Jersey and I flew around, and you see this is a perfect photograph. There's no boats, no nothing. And then it was gone. About 2 months later, it was gone. And that's the importance of recording every move we make. Now, I'm not saying anything's going to happen to us at Washington, D.C., however, was almost taken down. I don't think they can touch it anymore, but, laws are kind of made to be broken. And of course, who would have ever thunk in a million years that anyone would come and fly into 2 skyscrapers in New York City? These are the VZ Street stairs. There are a lot of lives that were saved because those stairs were still there. And that was about it. That was about the end of it. So now I'm traveling throughout the country. I've been to my favorite park, Monument Valley, which is run and owned by the Navajos. I've, of course, been to Yosemite and about every other national park on earth. I watched the cattle come down Denver streets, the longhorns, and horses run in snow in Wyoming. The other day, I was in St. Louis's Union Station. Look at this. I was so blown away, I didn't know what to do with myself. I mean, it is breathtaking. Now, it isn't, it's funny because a lot of people, I put it up on Facebook, and a lot of people wrote and said, well, I mean, isn't that better than Union Station? Or how does it compare? Or, I don't know, they're very different. But I will say to you this, I thought about it for about a week afterwards. I couldn't believe how gorgeous it is. And these women that are, carrying these lights, I mean, whoo, wears you out. Then I've done the plantations. I just finished Louisiana. I knew the owner of this house, which was it's Parlange Plantation. It's the oldest plantation family in America. A plantation that is still owned by the same family. And I went to see Miss Lucy many, many years, and she's now in heaven. And then the other day I did Homa's house, and they had their Mardi Gras little attachments. They're not quite so little, actually. They're about 400 pounds each. But of course, there was no Mardi Gras, but it was kind of fun to see. Then I went to New Mexico, and I've been through New Mexico. I've been in all the states many times. Been through New Mexico many times, and I never realized what it had. I was so blown away when finally my task was to go and actually look inside and see what's there. Well, I saw what was there all right, and I'm still recovering from all of that. This is Shamail. It was 1816, and they have several little chapels like this, if you want to call this little. And people come, it's a pilgrimage place, and they come from all over the world, and they come to get some dirt. There's a little place where you go and get a little tin of sand, and you carry it in your pocket for luck. I'm still carrying mine. I guess I shouldn't have told you that. Telluride, look how beautiful this is. I mean, as you go around America, you just say to yourself, you're kidding. This is our country. How lucky are we? And look at what's been saved. I mean, these are all historic buildings, and it's just magnificent. Ah, yes, Thomas Jefferson. How could we forget about him? Well, we didn't. You know what they did for me here? They have black covering all of the windows. I don't know that that's ever come off except for this image. I doubt it'll ever come off again. And not only that, it is so popular that people come around the clock. I mean, it's jammed, and I'm very worried about the floors. But I can understand why they're interested. This is the man that developed Phillips 66 in Bartlesville. That was an amazing place, his home. And then we have our Frank Lloyd Wright. That was his office in Bartlesville. And pretty amazing. He was an amazing man. I've done a lot of his work. This is in Dallas. It's Thanksgiving Square, glory window, and look at the stained glass here. Is that just so beautiful? And then when we get really way out there in America, I mean, way out there, you have Johnny Cash's home. Now, let me tell you the important thing about this, and that is that FDR gave it to them and the land. They would have not had a thing. They wouldn't have made it. They got 40 acres and they got this home. And that's Johnny Cash's home. But with all the travel I've done, and we go about 40,000 miles a year, I've been in the business for 41 years. I I still miss DC. I consider it my home. I was raised in Minneapolis, but there's just something about DC that's so special. And I am just really thrilled that I started my career here and I learned interiors here. I learned about architecture here. And I had all of those wonderful experiences that I've had because it taught me so much. And I'm just, I still shake my head in the luck of it all. And the fact that I'm married to the Library of Congress. They have 21 featured collections, digital collections, and I'm the only living person in those collections. So I guess I have my work cut out for me. So my question is, are there any questions?
Well, thank you so much, Carol. That was a really beautiful presentation. And, you know, as we wait for the questions to come in, I just want to say, you know, how thankful we are that you are able to go to these places and you know, document all these wonderful historic sites and interiors that, you know, sometimes we don't have the chance to go and see. So you're really kind of giving us that really special peek into a lot of these historic buildings that we don't get to explore on our own. So not so much a question.
People feel the same way about Washington, D.C. too.
Yeah.
You know, I think that when I show Washington, D.C., whatever it is, on Facebook, they come on in droves. I have about 45,000 followers.
Oh, wow.
And people just love Washington, D.C. Yes, they do. And I almost, doesn't matter what I show, you know, doesn't have to be one of the monuments.
Yeah. Yeah. The nation's capital.
I see there's some questions coming in.
Yeah, yeah. So not so much a question, but Hamda, she commented, she said, "Hi, Carol. It is so good to see you and hear your voice again. I attended a tour of the Willard Hotel in the late 1980s or early 1990s that you had conducted. It was a wonderful tour, and every time I go to the Willard Hotel or pass by it, I remember the wonderful tour I had by you. And thank you again."
So glad to have done that. How fun.
Yeah.
How interesting.
So Brian and Stacy have asked, did you happen to document Union Station's most recent restoration?
Yes, I did. I wasn't there for all of it because I was traveling pretty extensively. There is one little story I forgot to tell y'all during the initial restoration. So they finished everything. You know, this enormous vaulted ceiling. It's all gold leaf, by the way. Hello, all of it. And they look up finally about a month after everything's done and they're finishing all the, you know, the details, everything around it. They look up and the gold leaf is hanging down. One of the little squares, the gold leaf is hanging down. And they think, oh no, you know, what it took just to put it up. Well, they found that there was a homeless man living up in the attic. And that was his men's room, and that's why it was hanging down. But yes, I did. I was there. I was there for quite a bit of it. And it was fascinating too. And also to see that moving scaffolding. They had me do videos of that. So a lot of the work they have is mine. But finally, I was traveling so heavily throughout America for the Library of Congress that I didn't have time to finish it.
Okay, so Catherine Ferguson, she asked, wonderful photos. You talked
Thank
about
you.
weather. Can you talk about how to use natural light both for exterior and interiors? Tips on times of day or types of light that work better than others?
You know, that's interesting. That's a very interesting question. Now, I was on 4x5 film for a lot of my career, my early career. That meant when you popped that shutter, that was it. That's what you got, and that's all you saw. Okay. When you got home, you developed the film. If the light was blazing in there, that's what you got. However, the software has come so far. Now, first of all, I'm working with a phase 1 IQ4, which is above, and the software for it is above Photographs America. I'm sorry, well, not Photographs America, I didn't mean to say that, but anyway, it's kind of above what we have at this point. Now, what is advantageous is the fact that it has a way to quiet down light that is coming in the window in comparison to how dark the interior is. And so therefore, I am able to even them out and show you what my eye saw. And I could never do that with film. So our tools have come so far. But I think the other piece of this is when you have made your mistakes out in the middle of America somewhere, and you come home, and I remember I taught myself photography in the Willard Hotel. And you come home and, gee, that didn't quite turn out right, or what's wrong with this? And you find what the problem is and what you can do better. And then, of course, there are millions of courses online. But your best bet is just to go out and try it. And sometimes you might shoot into the sun and get shadows. So just do something different. You know what I mean? It's these days you could almost do anything and make it work. But, you know, for me, my task is one thing, and that is to show you what my eye saw. It's not about my art, not in any way, shape, or form. It is whatever I'm photographing looks like. That's the most important thing, so that 1,000 years from now, they can see whatever I'm photographing clear and clean. And my phase 1 IQ4 camera is 150 megabytes. So it's huge. So anyway, I should say megapixels really, but anyway, the key is that it's enormous. So do we have somebody else who I see more questions coming in?
Yeah. So Nancy asked, what existing building do you want to photograph most that you haven't had the chance to photograph yet?
Well, you know, that's interesting. Now, I don't know that there's much in DC because remember, I've done all the federal buildings. I've done, well, there's not, you know, the embassies and this, that, and the, I don't think there's much in DC. However, having just traveled for 7 months during the pandemic, there were some buildings I tried to get into that I couldn't because they were closed. So there were a couple of buildings in New Mexico that I would have died to have gotten in that I couldn't because, but you know, the other thing I want to do, and I'm sure I will get up and do it. That's the Patrick Moynihan train station. I understand it's quite like Penn Station, used to be. So, I mean, you know, how wonderful is that? I really would have to scratch my head. I have about 9 states left to do thoroughly. Even though I've been in all the states, we're now doing them thoroughly. And so probably I will have an opportunity if there is something that I really want to get, like, you know, St. Louis's Union Station to die for, that I would do research and find out, you know, what's important in those states. And probably get there. And our capitals, I've been in a couple of Kansas. I was in it 2 days ago. I just drooled. I did, and say, well, I mean, it was just like everywhere you go, you think, well, you know, I just left Louisiana and the plantations and how wonderful they were. Only they're having some problems because a lot of people didn't come for a year. So that was not easy. So there are probably more plantations I wouldn't mind getting. But I'm sure if I really looked thoroughly, I could think of some other places. But offhand, probably the Moynihan train station will be first on my list.
Yeah. Well, and thank you, because a lot of these photos you're taking us along this journey with you. So we appreciate them.
No, I see more questions. I think I see 4 still there. Are those we've answered those?
Yeah, there's some that we've answered. So Matthew from Facebook He asked, have you had the chance to check out the new World War I monument before it opens to the public? I think it would be very fitting given the proximity to the Willard Hotel.
No, I haven't, because I've been away for quite a bit over the last year. Anything like that, I would be very interested in. And I did, of course, the World War I monument that was there. That's been there for a very long time. But yes, I'm very interested in any, and have been at all the new monuments as they open, because they're so important to us. And it's such a moment in time, and you know, such a tribute to our veterans. So absolutely, I will definitely get down. I'm sure I'll be in DC enough to go down and catch that. And usually if I use, you know, wave Library of Congress in front of people, they're interested. Sometimes they are, but most of the time they are.
Yes, get that pass.
Well, just to interject a side note, that the War Memorial opens on April 16th to the public.
Okay,
So,
yes. And I will be home just around that time. So I probably, you know, will let it die down just a little bit. And
yes,
then, and also the Eisenhower Memorial I want to get. Is that open?
it's not completed yet, to my understanding, but we can certainly put you in touch with the head of the Memorial Commission. He is a former president of the DC Preservation League.
Oh, God. Oh, yes, I would love that. Yeah, any of that. And of course, the whole wonderfulness about me doing this. For instance, this morning I went to the Wizard of Oz Museum. Well, I photograph it. They can have the images. They're online for people across the world to offload, and the highest megapixel camera on earth. So everybody wins on this deal, and it's there for the ages. So there's no downside to this, none. And anybody can use them.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Carol. So another question from Dan. Have you photographed the U.S. Institute of Peace? It's quite unlike the Monumental Corps.
Is that the U.S., is that in Washington, D.C.?
I think so. Rebecca, do you know?
I'm not sure it is, because I think I just photographed it the other day. I think it's in Independence. Is that what it means?
Well, the Institute of Peace is over just to the south of where the State Department is on the hill.
Oh, I have not.
Mm-hmm.
I just did one the other day in Independence, but I would love to get it. You know, my eye has been off the prize, and so I really do need to get to these places because they're really important. That they're somewhere where people can download them all over the world, and that they're used, and that people can see them. And they're straight and they're not crooked or taken with a cell phone, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, so Matthew just, again, he just want to know kind of the same question, like, have you had the chance to photograph the General Post Office, now the Hotel Monaco? Would love to see photos of pre-renovation, a Robert Mills design building.
I photographed the Hotel Monaco outside for GSA, but I have not been inside. Has there been a restoration to it in the last 10 years? You know,
not in the last 10, yeah, not in the last 10 years. No, it was done just almost 20 years ago at this point.
That's what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did. I believe the exterior of it for GSA, but I don't think, and I'm not sure they are running it anymore. I really am not sure on that, but no, I have not done that, but that is something I should look at. I should go inside and look. I think I did some of the interior, now that I think about it. It's a long time ago. It has been 20 years, I think.
And GSA still holds the building. It's a public-private partnership between GSA and the Monaco Group, so the Kimpton Hotel Group. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought I had done it. See, they just, I did the Trump building, the old post office for GSA also. So anything they own that's historic, I do. and have done all over the country for years and years and years and years and years. And it's, you know, you think about it. I mean, really, it's hard to imagine. And I have to really almost remind myself that buildings will never be built like this again. This is it. And how lucky we are that we saved the majority, certainly in DC. And, you know, gargoyles and all sorts of interior bas reliefs, everything. It's just not going to be there. Not going to be the same. And so
And
it's
Carol,
amazingly important to record. Huh?
Carol, just a side note, you recently photographed St. Elizabeth's campus, many of the buildings that have been rehabbed at this point, and those photos could be seen at the Library of Congress as well. So you could do a great comparison if you weren't able to go on any of DCPL's public tours of the campus. You can see how the buildings have evolved over time, because Carol spent a number of decades now documenting that as well.
I have. But, you know, y'all also, you know, I am traveling a lot, pretty hard, and don't have a lot of time to think about even, you know, what I'm going to do the next minute. But if there is something like these three that everybody just brought up, that's important, I'm happy to go run out when I'm home. I mean, you know, no charge. It's important. It's important we put it in the can. You know, I guess I just didn't realize what I had of DC. And you see, it's just, can you imagine that we went through that? Can you imagine we were trash can? And, you know, people, this was America's Main Street, folks. And unfortunately, our small towns were kind of, you know, going through the same situation. And a lot of them obviously have been very hurt by the pandemic, and also by Amazon, which is a plus and a minus, you know, because the dress stores and the shoe stores and things like that are struggling.
Yeah.
So I'm a very big believer in photographing small towns like mad too, because that's a lot of America. But of course, I always remember DC and how important that is to me.
Yeah. Carol, we have a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Catherine asks, what are the current specs for images that will be cataloged in the Library of Congress? Didn't they once only accept black and white on film? Or was that just the Hobbs and HAER documentation? Anything about that?
Wait a minute now, say that again.
Yeah, like what are the current specs for images that will be cataloged to the Library of Congress?
What are the specs?
Yeah, I don't know.
I wonder what they mean by that. Like if someone were to give film, they want it scanned.
Right.
Now they can also scan it if they decide it is what they want to scan. They decided to take all my film and have me scan it.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest nightmare I've ever been through in my entire life. I will never do that again in my whole life. Why? Because dust.
Yeah.
It was just a heartache. It was like nothing I've ever been through.
And tabs in here documentation is slightly different than Carol's collection. So the drawings or the photographs that are required for National Register documentation or for Habs and here are different than what Carol's collection is and what the Library of Congress would accept.
That is correct. Now,
last year we had last October, we had a program with some photographers from the Heritage Documentation Program, and you can find that recording on our YouTube channel. To learn more about that.
Well, and the biggest fear, and I'm a little bit the one that dragged them into digital, but the biggest fear is, could it corrupt over time? And I understand that. And I've done presidential homes for the National Park Park Management group, and they've had me follow in film. So I so get that. I understand from the word go. But I get back to Matthew Brady's wax cylinder. You know, my feeling is as we move forth, very good chance they will weave digital onto whatever comes next. So certainly on my collection. Now, but I totally get that they're fearful because, you know, during my lifetime, I could go up to Granny's attic and get film because it was still there.
Right.
So, I mean, that's what's so great about it. That was what was so great about it. But, and then the other thing is the black and white element. And I asked Ford Petros, who used to be in charge of the architectural division at Prints and Photographs, what he thought. And he said, well, the only thing about color is that you can see the color. Color will change. Is red red? Is maroon maroon? You know, what is it? And if it's just black and white, you don't know really what that color was. So I have taken quite a bit in black and white, but basically I just use color. But I think the real key was when we had 9/11, there was a guy that got out of his car. He was right at the Pentagon and he was able to catch right after the plane hit, but he was on digital.
Mm.
And at that point, I think the library did some soul searching about accepting digital, because I was already starting to work in it, but I was still in film at that point. And then they said, yes, we want to accept it. So they did.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see like the future of the collection as we like are in this digital age.
And you know, my digital images are light years larger than a 4x5.
Right.
They're so huge that even I can't believe it. My eyes pop. So, you know, because of where I sit and what I have, it's probably worth it, but I hope so. I won't be here. I won't be here 100 years from now. And if that corrupts, don't blame me.
So we have another question from Sarah. So she said, beautiful photos of Lloyd Park and Capitol Hill. Have you photographed other DC neighborhoods, and do you have any other highlights?
I have photographed most DC neighborhoods. I was given a grant to go around and photograph, not the DC Preservation League, but somebody else who was interested in DC and had me do other things. And so I just went around and popped shots everywhere. All of it's fascinating.
Mhm.
And I
But
still, you know,
if you recall, Carol, if you recall, Carol, you asked me for a list of places I wanted photographs. So we do have those files. So we are working to get all of the pictures we have up online.
Oh, good.
For people to see.
Yeah. You mean that you have, that I photographed or that you have. Yeah. But the thing is, I think what was great for me as I just rode around and did neighborhoods is that DC is so neighborhoody. It has so many neighborhoods. And that most of the neighborhoods are historic. Think about that. I mean, that's amazing to me. And, you know, Francis Benjamin Johnston is buried right across the Lincoln Summer Home in the, what's the name of the cemetery? It's
Rock Creek Park.
Rock Creek, and it's where we'll be buried. And, you know, again, Lincoln used to ride his horse down to the White House, you know. I think he probably saw a lot of what's still there. So, and most of the neighborhoods that you ride around, that those buildings have been there for years and years and years and years and years. So, I mean, the DC Preservation League is an understatement. It has needed to be here forever because there's so much historic and so much historic that's important to keep and to watch over. And I'm sure y'all will agree with me all the way through, because that's, as I travel elsewhere, just like I did, I went to Russia and China and Europe many times, and now I understand America. And if you look at one of my images, you would pretty well know that it was from America. But pretty much I feel that about DC. That unless you, of course, if you just know the monuments, you may not know that how historic the neighborhoods are, but they are. I don't even know if there is a modern. And I did do a book of Mid-City Modern, what's it called? Modern images, modern places in DC. But I mean, they were like 70 years old. So you agree with me that most of DC is historic.
He's very
You agree with me on that? Huh?
That's why we're here.
I know. But that's why what I'm saying is you're just so necessary. It's not even funny.
Thank you.
And it's not just the monuments. That's the thing, is that the minute you leave the monument area, you're in historic. and how valuable that is and how wonderful that is, that it's our nation's capital, the showplace of America. And as I go through these small towns that haven't been able to afford to tear down their buildings or build new ones, a lot of them are historic too.
Mhm.
So is there anybody else who's asked a question or two?
Yeah, I think we have time for one more question.
Okay.
So Peter asked, what advice would you give to budding photographers who want to follow in your footsteps?
Anybody can follow in my footsteps. I just thought odd, unique thoughts. I'm an American girl. We're free. We're free to think anything we want to think and do anything we want to do. Now think about it. So I went to the Library of Congress and I said, you know what? I'm going to give you all my images and I'm going to make a living. Huh? So I went out and I found some wealthy funders and I started working in the States. And to date, I think there's been 8 or 10 wealthy people who have given money to do a state. And then the Library of Congress looked at me and said, maybe we should do the states. And so I'm doing Kansas right now. I just did 5 states on congressional funds. That's how important it is that we have a visual record of what we have so that people all over America and all over the world can see it. And the great thing about Washington, D.C. is we are the template. We're the place you want to look if you want your small town to make it, because it's been successful. And it's been successful because we've admired and restored and cared about our structures that have been around for a very long time. And, I can't imagine how much y'all have been involved in this. I'm sure my eyes would be wide open and I'm honored to just even talk amongst you. I was just there to document it, but it was a great lesson for me. It really was. And just how wonderfully everything was restored. Not all, it isn't always, and I'm sure there's a lot of watching over you need to do. But also how far you've come, with the DC Preservation League. It's known and it's admired. Wow. That's great. That's just great. But I would say for someone who's just starting out in this field, to just sit down with yourself and say, what do I want to do? Now, there were no females in architectural photography. I became an architectural photographer. I followed Frances. She did people also. I do people too. So I kind of took her lead and then thought wild thoughts, like, why don't I go find the money to do a state? So I did. It took a year. We started doing the states in 2010. We looked for the money in 2008. That was a joke. If you remember, the economy crashed. So what I'm saying is, think unique thoughts. We're Americans. We can think any thoughts we want. And going down the avenue of historic preservation is not a bad one because there's so much going on all over the United States. And America, no one was doing America when I started doing it. And I don't think anybody is now. All of it. And certainly nobody's nutty enough to give their images. I'm almost at 100,000 images at the Library of Congress.
Wow.
But it's that important that we have it. Francis Benjamin Johnston did it, and so should I. But it was hook and crook and unique thoughts that brought me to it. And, I think this guy in Humans of New York, he's photographing people just straight on and writing a little bit about them. Thousands of people come on to that.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really even have to be this over the top idea. But I love architecture. I love historic architecture. I'm very honored to speak with you and to have the DC Preservation League and interested in what I have to say.
Well, we really are, Carol, and we really appreciate all the work that you do. And I just put into the chat Carol's website, your main website, and then also a link to your collection at the Library of Congress. Again,
Yay.
everything is digital, so you can explore to your heart's content. So it is there. And I will also just put our website in too, and our contact information. But I just want to say thank you all so much for joining us tonight, and a very big special thank you to Carol, not only for taking the time to talk with us tonight about all the amazing work that you do, but also just the fact that all this photography is so crucial to the work that historic preservationists do, not only at DCPL, but across the United States, you know, being
It
able
really
to
is.
documenting our history and our identities. So thank you so much for all the work that you do. And there are a couple questions we didn't get to tonight, but I will make a note of those and I will pass
Okay.
those along to Carol.
Yeah,
But if
thank you.
anybody has additional questions following the program, again, you can email us at info@dcpreservation.org. I put it in the chat. And I highly encourage you again to visit Carol's website and her collection at the Library of Congress. And just as a final note, before we officially end, I just want to remind everybody to be on the lookout for other upcoming DCPL events. These programs are part of our 50th anniversary celebration this year, with this month highlighting most endangered places. So you can stay informed by following us on social media, or for signing up for our newsletter. And every month we send out an events blast to let you know what's going on with DCPL. So with that, thank you so much again, Carol. Thank you everybody for joining us. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
And thank you all. I'm just thrilled.